Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome General Manager, Trustworthy Computing, Microsoft, Adrienne Hall.
Good morning. It's my pleasure to be back at RSA this year. I was here a year ago, and I'm really pleased to return and talk to you about a topic related to trust in the cloud. Certainly, this is an extension in a way of what Hugh kicked off. Trust is an increasingly important topic, particularly when we think about the cloud and the responsibility of cloud providers. So over the next 30 minutes, I'm looking forward to talking to you more about the benefits of the cloud, the criteria for cloud providers. I'll give you some ideas around the categories of investment that I think you should challenge cloud providers to describe for you. And then lastly, I'll leave you with a checklist of key questions that I believe you should ask inside your organization and also of any cloud provider that you might be considering. The first place for us to start, however, is to pause briefly and think about many of the other innovations, whether they're models or whether they're technologies, over time. For example, when we think about the planetary model on the far left, proposed in 1543 by a Renaissance astronomer, Copernicus, this took about 200 years for people to widely adopt this model. When we think about photography, in the earliest days, people were concerned about the image and whether or not taking an image of somebody would actually minimize in some way their soul or take a part of them away. The telephone, also people had earlier concerns about the telephone in terms of transmitting disease and also sociologically what it would do to the way people interacted. This model, in fact, was one we looked at Microsoft about 10 years ago when we started Trustworthy Computing. We were looking for an analogy or an example of a technology that was both secure, private, and reliable in ways that people had become very accustomed to. And so in the work that we're doing in Trustworthy Computing, which is both an internal effort, something we're extending into the broader community, but also a group inside Microsoft that focuses on security, privacy, and reliability across the product areas. So in that way, we are organizationally able to help influence Microsoft and govern the way we think about these topics in terms of technology investments. Of course, this is very key with the cloud. So first, just to touch on many of the benefits that people are seeing about cloud computing. Certainly, folks are looking for scalability. They like the flexibility of being able to add servers quickly if they need to and rely on other companies to provide that infrastructure. Anytime we can lower or improve cost, people are looking at the benefits of moving asset management and tracking of financial results from one side of the balance sheet to the other and operationalizing some of those costs through services. Anytime we can build on existing infrastructure and really extend that, that's also a great thing for customers. Today, we're really pleased to announce a new customer for us. G4S, a UK-based security solutions company, is announcing today that they will be moving their cache management system to the Azure platform. And one of the reasons they looked at that had to do with the security model built into Azure that has multiple layers of security, hardening, and defense. They also really like the scalability of the cloud offering. They can decide to enter a new market and quickly use the data centers that Microsoft has in place as opposed to building those assets themselves. And then we've got a host of other companies we've put up here for you just to show some of the names of companies that are adopting the cloud and that we're excited to see moving to the cloud. So certainly a lot of benefits and exciting things going on. Now, if I look at some of the trends, this is most recently a study from the IT Governance Institute in 2011. And what this study is saying is that over 50% of corporate IT departments are beginning to implement cloud projects right now. And this is across the spectrum of what I would call easier or lower risk to move around messaging or collaboration, to more mission-critical systems. The G4S solution with cache management and tracking is a mission-critical application for them. And we'll see a host of different types of solutions that are being moved to the cloud. We also will see companies have varying degrees of comfort in terms of what they move to the cloud based on their own risk profiles. For example, I can imagine a car company might not want to put their latest blueprints for the new car design in the cloud. However, there may be other companies that have business-to-business relationships with a variety of vendors where putting something in a protected cloud or more of a private cloud offering might be the best thing for them to do. And we'll also see increasing numbers of people beginning to think about the cloud offerings that they might consider, which also means that there are about 20% of you in the audience today, or of our customers and potential customers around the world, that are just beginning to think about the cloud. And they will be looking for references and looking at the different security and privacy models in place around the cloud offerings today. So with that said, there are also a set of barriers to cloud trust. And when I think about the discussions people are having around the cloud, they're covering the benefits at a high level that I mentioned on the preceding slide. They're talking about the individual offering sets and the security, privacy, or reliability features of those. And then in the middle, there are a set of questions that you'll be familiar with. And they're really the ones around how people are securing the cloud, but also how they're building the services that are running on the cloud. We're also looking at privacy and the data protections around that. And then there's this question of workload, because in many ways, the cloud is giving people an opportunity to look at the keys to the kingdom that you all own and deciding which ones you're comfortable transferring and how that workload changes. And of course, the global compliance questions that people have. There is a session at this event on global compliance and European compliance, so if you're interested in this area, I'd encourage you to take a look at that session also. So security is one of those top-of-mind concepts, obviously, when we think about the cloud. We're releasing today our Security Intelligence Report, which we issue twice a year. We have the one coming out today at RSA. We also have it available on our website. And what this report tells us, several things, and they do have some implications for the cloud. The first is that the familiar threats that we've seen all along continue to dominate the threat landscape. These are the brute force attacks, these are the social engineering attacks, auto run, these standard types of threats that you're familiar with continue to make up a very large percentage of the attack space. 99% or higher of these vulnerability attacks have existing remediations and updates in place. So that's reassuring, but what we also see is that people aren't necessarily still doing all of the things they need to do to protect their systems against vulnerability that have known updates in place. Less than 1% of the vulnerability attacks were the zero-day term, where there is no known update yet for that particular type of attack. So this is a very small number, and I think it's worth noting that, because this is, of course, a very pressing and concerning attack type, but it is a relatively small percentage, and we need to keep that in mind. Another key point is that all of the fundamental steps that you're taking today are affecting change in the corporate or in the organizational environment. So keep doing those things, and realize too that as we see vulnerability disclosures declining, that also means that the things you're doing will help prevent against any new known attacks. So when people are looking at the cloud, all of the risks from the standard environment or the existing environments people have are ones that they're starting to think about, how does that actually transfer to me in the cloud? And what we see happening is that given 99% of the known attacks are manageable, given people are still having issues, this means that large percentages of customers are not currently doing all of the things that will help them remediate or protect against known attacks. So in this example, with the animation, you saw several of our applications moving from a traditional environment through the data center over into this space, which I'm characterizing as sort of the managed cloud. And when we look at Word or Microsoft Dynamics customer relationship management software, bit of a mouthful, but represented by the three colored sails, and then Outlook, and we've of course got an example of a data center. If we think about moving and managing applications in the cloud, then what you're essentially able to do is consider transferring a level of the security risk from the environment that you might currently be managing to a cloud provider to do that for you. And when I think about the number of companies that don't have dedicated IT staff, or small businesses, for example, such as a dental office or a medical office, where they really want to manage the business that they're in and not have their office manager or dental hygienist or one of the other staff members manage IT. If we think about the cloud, there's an opportunity then for cloud providers to manage that security risk and transfer a degree of that to the cloud. When we think about larger organizations, they can look at the IT staff they have and perhaps having them focus again on innovation and all the wonderful things that we want to do with technology, as opposed to managing the risk profile for their organization. So I think in this space there'll be some very interesting things to watch as people look at what they might have managed traditionally and what could potentially be managed, such as updates in the cloud. So with that backdrop, there were really three categories of focus that I believe you should be talking to your vendors about when you're considering cloud providers. The first is development. This is everything about building cloud solutions, all of the work that a vendor is going through to deliver the best quality cloud offering. The operational space is everything running in the data center. This covers all of the compliance components, all the operational elements. And then the third area is incident response, and this relates to what vendors do if and when the unexpected occurs. And you've heard some of that this morning too, and there are some other very good sessions on the calendar over the next few days in this regard. So to go into these in slightly more detail, what we're doing at Microsoft, one piece to highlight is the security development lifecycle, which is a process that we've had in place since 2004. At that point in time, we had a variety of different security processes in place across different product offerings. And what our executive management asked the company to do was to look across the different offerings and create a left-to-right security development lifecycle that covers everything from the earliest architecture of a product through the development, testing, and deployment phases, and to really get consistent around how we look at the latest threats, do threat modeling at the earliest stages, and work all of those concepts across the entire design lifecycle for our products. Key principles for Microsoft are that every developer is trained on the SDL, whether you're a brand new computer science student or you're a PhD transfer from any other organization. People go through security development lifecycle training. That also helps us, frankly, with culture, because you're able to consistently put the security topic in front of your development community on a regular basis. And in doing so, you're able to keep inculcating the latest security activities, but also foster that continuous education and training. That puts us in good stead when we look at evolving offerings. So whether it's packaged products or whether it's cloud offerings, having something consistent in place that the development staff and the IT staff goes through regularly has become a very useful and important principle for us at Microsoft. The other piece to mention is that before any products are shipped, they go through a complete security review. And this means that we cannot release and do not release a product if it doesn't pass all of the security checkpoints. This also is an important cultural piece because we have a decentralized development model at Microsoft. We've got people building Office, we've got people building Xbox, we've got people innovating new mobile solutions. And so with a final consistent security review, we're able to have that stamp that is consistent regardless of the product that we have that's going to be releasing. If you are interested in more on the SDL, there are also some really good sessions here related to the Safe Code initiative, where Steve Lipner, who I like to call the father of the SDL, is speaking on the panel. And that Safe Code initiative is a global industry consortium of companies that are working on exactly this topic. How do we build the most secure products across the world and have the best experiences for people using those technologies? So an important point too around these kinds of industry practices is that we recognize there are things we need to do at Microsoft, but given how expansive the Windows platform is and the development tools that are out there, and the server environments, the interoperable nature of everybody's IT systems, we want to share what we have. And so we feel really great that we've got the SDL in a variety of places in the industry. We are platform agnostic with this process, which means that no matter what you're building on, you can use these tools. We've got fuzzing tools, we have threat modeling tools, we have a variety of different approaches policy-wise that people can use across any platform. And these are free tools. They're free of charge. You can download them from our websites, and the methodologies and tools are included in that. So we've really got a great set of tools for people. We know too that as the speed of development decreases with the cloud, we wanted to be sure people had an abbreviated SDL process that they could use. And so we have SDL Agile in place. That's what we call the Agile development model for the security development lifecycle. And we've had about 18,000 or so downloads of this particular guidance over the last year plus. We've had about 700,000 downloads of the SDL. So this is widely adopted now and is something I'd really encourage you to take a look at inside your organizations if you've not done so yet. Collaboration with government and industry is another key component of this kind of a development practice, either things like the Safe Code Initiative. This is where we also are involved in the Cloud Security Alliance and really talking with industry and government about that. We also see law enforcement being very key around secure coding practices and the actual law enforcement aspects. Some of you may have noticed a couple weeks ago we had another botnet takedown announced, which was the Kilohost botnet. And in this particular case, we have for the first time named defendants in that case. And what that does is really help internet service providers make sure that they're not setting up new domains for people who are known to be involved in a current pending court case. In the previous botnet takedowns, this was not the case, and so this is a good example of where law enforcement and legislative activities are going along with the industry efforts underway. So the second category, operations investments, this is the entire data center realm. We're making a number of investments, just as you see other cloud providers in multi-location data centers, in all of the different activities that we're doing in the data center around compliance requirements. We certainly have all the certifications one would expect between ISO 27001 and SAS 70 Type 1 and 2, all of the certs and attestations that one would hope a cloud provider has. We do have the British Standards Institute come into our data centers and take a look at our processes and our practices. And we also have Deloitte come in. So they do a particular security review of the operating environment in the data center. We have a variety of defense in-depth measures around physical security. This is everything from access to entry in the data center to encrypted protection layers. We do daily scanning in the operating environment and really make sure that everything is running optimally. If there is something that occurs, it's flagged very quickly and we're able to look at it and begin recovery immediately. So lots of investments there, and ones that we would expect to see and continue to invest in over time. Now, if we look at a different sort of pivot on operations in the whole operating environment, there's a level of integrity that we expect to see across these different aspects. Risk management really relates to the security profile of different applications. It looks at everything from the types of tools that we would be running. There's a level of business continuity management involved in risk management. The security services are the threat models we would run across the data center. And so this is slightly separate from the development environment I talked about earlier, where we actually do that final security review before a service goes live. This is when they're live, how are we scanning and looking at the security profile inside the data center. Once we have something that we've spotted, there's a solutions delivery component where we take a look at what we will need to do to improve the security posture of a particular application. In the standards and compliance area, where we also have sessions going on at RSA, this is a part of the discussion too that I like to discuss with people around shared responsibility, because there's certainly a lot that companies need to do, such as Microsoft, but there are also within your own IT practices risk professionals, security officers, privacy officers that need to engage with their risk management officers to take a look at what things need to be complied with in the cloud that are unique to your industry, maybe retail, banking, healthcare. There are sets of compliance requirements that your businesses have unique understanding and knowledge of. And in that regard, this is really a shared discussion or shared responsibility relative to cloud delivery and cloud operations. We've also seen people in the line of business or purchasing department take a look at the cloud offerings, decide to purchase them, independent of any discussions with the security professionals or the risk management officers. And what happens there, unfortunately, is the purchasing team may buy a cloud offering that might be missing something like an e-forensics function, for example, or something else that's required from a security posture because the two sides of the organization haven't necessarily been talking together. So we really want to encourage people when they look at adopting the cloud to look at these different elements of both the vendor's operational model and the different integrity pieces they have in place, and also what's going on inside the IT environment inside your own business. Now the third category, incident response, this is what happens when the unexpected occurs, whether it's a submarine captain pulling up a cable underground, whether it's a natural disaster, whether it's a hardware failure, any number of things that can occur. This really is not just about responding, but also about recovering. And it is in the details around recovery that you should be asking questions of your cloud provider. For us, one of the key parts of incident management is the business continuity plan and having a set of things in place that you can rely on if and when these things do occur. An example I'll share with you relates to the tragedy in Japan where the earthquake and subsequent tsunami had all kinds of impacts in the region, tragic human issues, of course. Now for Microsoft, our data center is located about 140 miles south of the epicenter of that earthquake. And we had no issues for any customers running services in the data center. It's also where we run Hotmail for the region. But because of the seismic activity, it was possible that there might be follow-on earthquakes. So we elected to begin moving all of the operations in that Japanese data center to a data center in North America immediately, which we did over the next 7 days with no service interruption. So we began moved all of the applications with no service interruption over that period of time. We also elected to keep all of the Hotmail accounts running, which numbered about 10 million. This gave people in region the opportunity to reach loved ones and check on social services. And in that way, we were able to really be part of that relief effort, at the same time protecting and insulating the existing customers in the data center from any potential activity post the earthquake and all of the surrounding events. Another interesting component from a learning perspective was that with the Japanese government's request of vendors to really minimize the power drain on the power grid, Microsoft was able to free up capacity in the data center for the Red Cross, for the Japanese government, and any of the relief efforts where they were spinning up a set of services very quickly. Now, in doing that, we see much of the cloud benefit really coming through, where you've got existing data center capacity that's unused, that you can very quickly allow development to come in and spin up something new and use that in a very well leveraged way when we think about the capacity that was sitting there. We had, of course, generators and both diesel and battery for the data center, and could switch between the two based on the requirements from power grid management. And that's a very interesting look at how you can really both create that sort of seamless failover between data centers in different geographies and use that, but also take advantage of the capacity that exists and be agile with it. For Microsoft, we've got 4 operation centers around the world that are monitoring all of the data center 24/7. We also have specialty expertise in a couple of areas. One is the security domain and the other is the privacy area. We think about these two slightly differently, although really it's about securing the customer. With security, we look at all the perimeter defense and all of the things that you all are experts in. We also look at the privacy model. Microsoft has a privacy policy for development, and so we look at how we marry those two expertise aspects to come together to sort of protect the offering set that's running. If there is an issue in any one of the data centers with any service, we have behind the scenes security and privacy experts who can take a look at what that situation is and advise the operators in those global 4 operating centers. This gives us an ability to really bring the best expertise to bear and to bring the folks that have the domain knowledge around the particular attack type or hardware situation that might be going on. So if we look at this checklist I referenced earlier, these are the categories of questions that we encourage people to talk about. It's really around what are those process and technology investments for security, privacy, and reliability. And I'd encourage you to look pre-data center. So not just what's going on in the operating environment, but how are people building online services to make sure that when they do run, they have been built with the latest and greatest security, privacy, and uptime related development practices, so that when we're operating, you have the best chance of great operating environment there. Once you're in the data center, how is the company protecting against any new vulnerabilities? How are they rolling in new signatures, new threat information, and really bringing that into the data center? Business continuity planning, also very key. You heard about that from some of the other speakers this morning. And not just whether you have them, but are they tested? Have they been dusted off and really worked on? And have they been modeled at a time when there is not a crisis? I think that's a really key point, is to have your company, have your service provider talk to you about what they have done to model these things before there is actually a reason to use them. And then when you are operating, what monitoring systems are in place to really gauge the quality of service that is running in the data center. If you have any questions, I'm ADRIENNH, so Adrienne, but take the E off, at Microsoft.com. I'd be glad to hear from you. Love to hear any questions you have or feedback about the presentation or the topics. It is an exciting and interesting time for the industry. There's certainly lots to do, no end of work for security professionals, and overall, I think a great time to look at the exciting offerings that are coming along. It's our job as a company to make people feel comfortable with this shift in technology, and also to give people the information and tools so that you can make the sort of balance and choice decisions that you have to make, whether it's running something in a public setting, in a private setting, based on our platform, based on somebody else's platform, whatever it is, it's up to us to help you trust the cloud, and we look forward to those opportunities and take that responsibility very seriously. So thank you.